And it says we're live. Hey everybody, welcome to Love First Christians Bible Study. This week, I am Hody Johns. I'm joined by Ben Williams. The majestic Ben Williams is back with us. It's good to see you, Ben.
Good to be back, man. I missed you guys.
And you guys would hate me if I didn't have him here. I've already seen the results when he's not here. So Aaron Goss, Aaron, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing well, and I'm feeling loved now.
Good. Well, as you should. At least more loved than Hody solo. Hody plus Aaron is a better thing than Hody minus Aaron. We have learned that statistically, and obviously, the same is true for Ben too. Although, thankfully, nobody threatened to walk out, without that. So, Ben, we'll get you integrated to the point where you're not there, people will riot. That's the goal.
Wow.
Okay. All you have to do is bribe that person, like I did, to make the comment.
Yeah. Right. I have my mom, and actually she was the one who made the comment. Was like, I'm not going to watch this if Aaron's not there, Hody. I already know what you're going to say. And I'm just like, Mom, I want my $20 back. Let's go ahead and jump into some fun Bible stuff here. So one of the interesting things that I learned last week, and this wasn't necessarily, it was part of the reading, but I did not know this, and I had to look it up, Aaron, because of a video that you shared, freeing Christians from Americhristianity. Ben, I know you have feelings from that just from the title alone, but I did not know, and it turns out to be true, that the most commanded thing in the Bible is do not be afraid, and it has 365 commandments about not being afraid and not fearing. I did not know that, but I found it fascinating as part of the video, and I thought it was so core to kind of where we leap off with the Love First Christians, that coming from a place of I obviously we're not the security first Christians, I guess, but that could be something, maybe somebody else wants to do that one as well. It's not like I made us to be like the opposite of fear, but it's something that, maybe unintentionally, is just when you have that love, you aren't afraid. And so it is something where people can ask a question without fear of backlash, say what they're thinking without, being afraid that this is going to shatter their reputation, or be honest with themselves. And when people are afraid of either what's inside themselves or what other people are up to, I mean, especially with Christianity, let's be honest, like the xenophobia there, like being afraid of those people, predominantly Christians, oddly enough, but people from other countries, that you get led to a bad place. And I think the reason for this push to not fear is because you're so manipulatable when you're afraid, right? Like when you seek safety, drowning man grasps at straws, right? Like that, you will do anything when you're afraid in the name of safety. And so if we remove fear from people, they no longer have to reach out of desperation. And that God, at least the Christian God, isn't somebody that wants you to find him because you've got nowhere else to turn. He wants you to find him because, like, you're in a good place, and that's where you're meant to be, is with God when you're in a good place, which is different from you feel like you're on the border of hell and you need to latch onto God, because if not, you're just going to say one thing wrong and tip right over the edge. I know, and we read a verse about not fearing, so obviously it's somewhat tangentially related. Aaron, obviously you shared the video, so why don't you share some of your thoughts, either about not being afraid or from that video specifically?
Yeah, that video, the discussion originated as a result of me asking the question, like, who are your Christian role models?
Right.
And I was still thinking about that discussion as, through this week. Like, I don't remember the name of the person that you recommended off the top of my head. It was like Eanes.
Peter Enns. Yeah.
Enns, that's right. I ended up following them on Facebook, and I've seen several of their posts now, and there hasn't been a single one that I've disliked. So I really appreciate that recommendation.
And conversely, before I let you continue, you recommended Nathan Monk, who I followed, and I've loved all his posts too. So yeah, very cool.
But yeah, no, I've been thinking about being more mindful about getting more of that influence in my life, because prior to me coming back to the faith about 5 years ago, I had been lone wolf Christianitying it for a long time. Like ostensibly being a Christian, but having absolutely no Christian influences in my life. Not being connected to any sort of Bible group or anything like that. Not really being theologically connected to anyone, even that I like really cared about at all. Just nominally calling myself a Christian, and that's the end of my path towards God. And obviously that's not healthy. So um yeah I want to, as part of my deconstruction and reconstruction, find myself half dozen at least Christian influences that I have several already in my personal life. I've got you, I've got Ryan, that I turn to, but having some people that I can on social media that I can refer to, keep my North Star in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm glad. It was a great question, and unfortunately, I didn't come up with many new names during the week. It's a rare breed. There was somebody we had a Twitter exchange, and who was like, "I don't know of any Christian libertarians that didn't end up selling out for Trump." And obviously, there were some, but the fact that there was not enough in his world, and he is an online libertarian person, the fact that that was his perception means that, yeah, we got very few, not only very few people, but very few leaders, especially, that are making it known, like, no, this is there are certain lines that we don't cross, and that's certainly one of them. Ben, your thoughts on this kind of subject matter?
So it's interesting. One of the things that I have really had to work through is fear. As a kid, I was petrified of God. Petrified of hell, petrified of punishment from hell, and I was taught that the father is the prophet, the priest, and the king of the home. And so my father, ruled with an iron fist, and and his beatings were pretty painful, and left bruises on my buttocks and lower back and sometimes legs. And it's ironic that I looked at my dad. He was supposed to be the type and figure of Jesus, so that's what Jesus represented to me, was this mighty man with this huge paddle over me, ready to beat me to death. And I realized that I have lived in fear of God and of Jesus most of my life, until around 40, when I was in 2017, when I said, I started asking questions, and it's almost like I felt a little bit of fear leave me, like fear of the pastor, because I was taught that the man of God, you cannot disobey him. He has control over you and over your life. So here I am. I'm having these pastors that are dictating, and I've had some pastors really dictate my life, even though I would secretly disobey them, but I lived in petrified fear. I remember being afraid that my pastor would find out that I went to the movies. Petrified, because I knew that I could be, talked about from the pulpit, and or when my wife, we decided she was going to start wearing pants for our work situation, and we were petrified, and sure enough, the pastor found out about it, but that ended up being a good thing, because that's when we left the IFB, was over pants, and we're like, I'm done. And then I went from there to Southern Baptist, and then I left that mess. But each time I kept being afraid of the pastors, and it was like a switch flipped in my brain, and I realized that the fear is a fear of man, a significant fear of man that is prominent, within evangelical Christianity. Fear of being honest. You're not allowed to be transparent with each other. You can't be honest with each other. You can't be open with each other, because the other one might look down on you from a spiritual aspect, or you might not fit in anymore in the group, or they might not let you do anything in the group because you're this horrible sinner. And so there's this constant fear, and from literally from every aspect within Christianity, from a child up, there's fear, 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 fear. And I remind myself often, fear is a liar. And fear is opposite of the love of God. So those are my
really.
I didn't see the video, but
that's okay.
I mean, literally, I remember being.
You lived the video. To be honest.
Lived it.
Yeah,
that's what it sounds like. But I mean, I remember those messages talking about preaching against. You remember the little no fear stickers that you'd see on people's cars?
Of course.
I mean, I heard.
I was a no fear gear kid. I had the shirts and everything.
I remember the sermons being preached against that. Like, how dare you would even wear that, because that is an abomination against God, because we are supposed to be in fear and trembling before an almighty God. Those messages, I heard them, and I listened to them, and I believed them. Lived in absolute fear, which is bondage. Total bondage.
I mean, it's funny to me that the way to get into heaven, the number one way listed in the Bible is to not judge. And then the number one command throughout the entire Bible is to not fear. And if we know things about Christians, they are very fearful / fear inspiring people and very judgmental. And it's like, how badly have we really let down the faith when those are kind of two of our biggest struggles?
I think that's why we're seeing so much homophobia. I mean, June is the month. I call June the month where Christians reveal how horrible they are, because they are just. I mean, I have seen some horrible Facebook posts put out by Christians against LGBTQ, and it's because they're afraid of them. They're afraid of something that they don't understand. And so it's easier for them to live in a judgmental state that literally becomes borderline hate rather than try to understand.
I saw a Facebook post earlier today that was it was less vile than a lot of the other Facebook posts I regularly see, especially since Pride Month started.
Yeah.
But it was really indicative of their mindset. It was a picture of a Target area, like a Target store, the interior of the store on the kids' clothing section. And it said, "This is Target's Pride merchandise." And it was a picture of a whole bunch of kids' merchandise that was patriotic, like July 4th stuff.
I saw that.
And it's like, we're winning. We're finally starting to win again, or whatever. And it's really indicative of the cultural mindset of a conservative, that it's literally a war to them. Like, the culture war is a war. Like, it's over hearts and minds and everything like that. And it
is a war. They say it's a war. They teach it as a war.
Well, like, when we think of culture war, we think that's just a conservative, like, made up nonsense. But they literally, like, believe it. Like, they sincerely believe, like, they probably still sincerely believe there's a war on Christmas, from Rush Limbaugh 30 years ago. It really is like a peer into the mind of madness, sort of situation.
There's I mean, it's just, and I don't want to I do want to be clear that this is something that is not, this is a human condition and not just like a conservative condition. Like, the idea, I mean, how many people did we hear it from that it's like, if we don't resort to violence, then this is what's next, or this is the last. I mean, my parents genuinely believe, Jamie's parents genuinely believe we've had our last election, like, it's over. And that I don't want to say that this never happens, of course, right? Like, we've had more democracies fall in the last 20 years than we've had like monarchies fall ever, right? Like in the history of the world, right? So like I understand democracy is a brittle thing, but the idea that like they are so petrified of one person, and it's like we are just not supposed to be afraid of people, right? Like of other people. Like if
Well,
we say come on to our barbecue, I shouldn't be petrified of who shows up, right? Like welcome, welcome, unless you're scaring off other people, right? Like unless you being welcome makes other people unwelcome. But generally speaking, I even welcome the challenge of changing somebody, of
I
trying
mean,
to
like I would say that your Jamie's parents are probably, justly right to be worried about that sort of outcome.
Mhm.
But I guess it's not the belief that's the issue. It's what do you do as a result of that belief? Like do you hunker down? Do you buy food like non-perishable food to stock up and then like hunker down in your room, or do you get out there and like make sure like proactively that we're not going to lose our country? That sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So I
Do you
got a
have a
question for you.
eulogy or do you fight back? Yeah.
Exactly.
So I got a question. You kind of triggered a thought that, let's say your picnic. We'll use that as an example, and let's say that one of the people that wants to come is a former convicted child molester that's on the registry, and you're afraid of them coming because you're afraid that they will do something. So there's times where fear can be a good thing, but it's what we do with the fear. Is that, or maybe that's a crossover into discernment.
I think that as it pertains to that topic specifically, I think that the belief, not necessarily that the justice system is not without flaws and everything like that, but I think that the belief in the justice system has to be first order, I guess. That there's
I just
nuances.
opened up a can of worms. I'm sorry.
You're good. You're good.
But there's nuances that have to be there, like
Yeah.
nuances that have to be explored, but that you have to believe in reformation, and that if a person serves their time, that they're just as much entitled to participate in society as the rest of us.
Mhm.
And so, I mean,
But see, recidivism, you say the word, is like
recidivism,
90,
yeah.
it's like 98% or something crazy like that.
Well, see, what I would hope that would happen in that sort of situation is that the family members and friends of that individual would come to them and be like, "Hey, man, I know you're, what I assume, man, because a lot of times it is, man, but we'll go, hey, I know you're going to struggle with this. I'd like to be somebody that you can lean on if you're feeling like you're tempted to go back into that sort of thing. We can hold each other accountable and stuff like that." And that, because the problem is a lot of times people will be so ostracizing to that person that's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It gives them no hope.
Exactly. They don't have. They feel like everyone
Okay,
is
I see what
going to
you're saying.
prejudge them. So why shouldn't they just go back into it again? If they're all, everybody's going to assume they're going to do it, why not just do it? Because that's what you're typecast into.
You just give up because there's literally no reason to not to anymore at that
Right.
point.
I mean, it's not be so willfully naive that you don't consider it as an option that somebody could have recidivism or something like that. But at the same time, don't just put them in your mind as like, okay, well, it's just a matter of time, and until this person inevitably screws up again and goes back off to jail. That's my thought process on it.
So again, it's interesting. So making sure that fear doesn't dominate the decision, and that there's discernment and wisdom used, learning to be help to an individual while also having guidelines and perimeters.
Well, and I think it carries over into not just somebody who's been formally convicted, but also keeping people from being initially predators in the first place by being more open-minded and helpful to people who would be potential potentially fall into that trap in the first place. I mean, like the culture that we have of like kill all pedos, is
It's
not
not
helping.
working. Our
It's not
culture's not
working.
working.
We've
It's not
done
working.
we've done that for decades now, and it hasn't worked. Like it just does not work. We need to be proactively. The ideal circumstance would be somebody feels like they're having pedophilic tendencies or something like that. They feel themselves slipping into that, and they reach out to their family and their friends and be like, "I feel like I'm struggling with this. I need you to help me keep me accountable." And so they help.
No.
Yeah, you reach out to somebody ahead of time and you're like, "I'm struggling with this. I'd like you to help me keep accountable." And like that person could then engineer circumstances where they're never alone with a child, but at the same time they're not feeling judged for it at the same, like
Yeah.
and so they can manage honestly, they can manage their illness.
Fear is preventing people from being able to be honest.
Right. Well,
And getting the help they need.
The culture of kill all pedos means that people don't actually come out as pedos until after they've already been caught.
Yeah.
And usually that's after they've already victimized one or more people. Whereas if we had a culture where they were not accepted in the sense of like you can commit the crime, but they were accepted in the sense that you can be helped, then we wouldn't have to have these people hiding their predilections.
I think, and Aaron, like a lot what you were saying earlier, like if a plane crashes, starts filling up with water, are you right to be afraid? Well, you certainly just shouldn't sit there with like your seatbelt buckled, right? Like there's something to do.
Right.
But panic, that's even worse than just staying still. You panic and you're dragging people down with you, right? And so there is an appropriate thing of being like, ooh, this thing's filling up with water, I got to do something. In the case of like what Aaron's saying, I'm completely with him. So one of the things that I learned from my time in therapy, and I made a post about this a while ago, but the best way to treat like pedophiles, and people are like, well, I'm sexually attracted to, I can't do anything about it. It's not actually true. People's sexual appetites evolve as they evolve as people. Middle schoolers aren't pedophiles for being attracted to other middle schoolers, right? Like and high schoolers aren't pedos when they're attracted to other high schoolers. Our appetites change, our desires change as we get older, and we learn, if we mature properly, to be attracted to people our age. It's no shock that in Hollywood, with child actors who grow up and are pushed, who actually don't get to graduate through a lot of these the gateways to adulthood, right? Like they don't go through many of the ceremonies and the events that other people go through, end up having sexual attraction to people when they stopped maturing themselves, right? And to fix that, they end up having to grow up themselves. And then what happens is then from there, their attraction will change. Now, this is
traumatic. You also, I just bumped my foot massager. I don't know if you can hear that or not. 1 second.
Sounds great. You're making me jealous now.
One of the thoughts you just gave me is and this is where I've learned in therapy too, is a traumatic event, that happens to a child. When I first started therapy, I tested out here at a 40-year-old man with social skills of a 8-year-old, 7-year-old. So what was going on is they're finding a lot of men are this way. They're stuck in a trauma actually blocked in important formative years of their life. So they compensate with toxicity, toxic ways to survive. So that is another reason that you see a lot of the pedophilia too, is you got grown adults, but they're stuck in a trauma moment that happened as a child. It's not an excuse for their behavior, but it helps understand their behavior and helps start with. My therapist said that that's when therapists work with those, they have to work with the person that committed the crime. they have to work on not only helping break the attraction, they have to go back and find out where it began. And it often started when they were a child.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, that's where I was about to go is I made a generalization. Not every person who commits the same crime or has the same problem gets there for the same reasons, right? Like kleptomania, can be part of an underdeveloped portion neurologically in your brain. It could also be because you didn't receive enough attention as a child. It also could be a lack of adrenaline, right? Like there's many answers to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, and this is why, I think to bring it all back around, individualism as opposed to collectivism is the key, right? Like we're not afraid of large swath. I have to be afraid of just all, even pedophiles, but like I don't have to be afraid of all Mexicans or gays or whatever, because of this, that, or the other. I can take them as a collection and be like, all right, let's see why they are how they are. Like what made this person the way that they are. We shouldn't fear liberals or conservatives or whatever. Like that's just furthering these stupid divisions. Like analyze where they're at. And I learned that you can learn it from Jesus. Just making sure people's needs are met automatically makes them less afraid of your messaging and of what you might have to offer.
Yep.
I think there was this study that was like people are more likely, and this is tangential, it's not religious, but people are like 6 times more likely to become libertarians after getting out of financial debt than they are after reading a libertarian book. So it's like we don't have to preach it to preach it. We can just kind of live it or help people out and get them there. And so when we treat people, label them as their crime, well, the crime's probably not the origin. The origin is something else. And our job is to humanize people enough to get at that origin. Yeah. Anything else you guys want to say before we move on to other Bible stuff?
No, that was a good discussion.
Yeah. I was wrestling with it this week, so it was a good time. Let me start with a Bible verse. So we got one from Psalms that I really like a lot. And I think people hear this verse. It's one of the most quoted in Psalms, but I don't think they think about it very much because it just sounds nice, but there's more to it. And it's your word is a lamp to guide my feet and a light for my path. So it's one we talk about. And obviously like,
I like to look these up.
Yeah, sure. I like it when people don't look them up. That way I can take them out of context. But it's actually Psalm 119. So it's in the middle of the longest psalm ever. So Psalm 119, many stanzas. We actually just finished reading it this week. And I believe it's actually the longest chapter of the Bible. Psalm 119.
I believe it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, verse 105, if you're looking for it specifically. So what I really like about this verse is where the light is directed at, and it's at your feet. It's right there at your path. I think what people want when they think of Christianity or God is a light forward. We want to see the horizon better, right? We want like a headlight. We want to be able to see the future. We want to be able to know. But Jesus is always like, man, let tomorrow's problems be tomorrow's problems. Do the right thing today, right? Focus on the second that you're in. Focus on the moment that you're in, and let tomorrow resolve however it will. And so what I like about this is it's not saying we're going to light up the entire mountain. It's going to light up your feet and your path, right? Like one step at a time. Now, when you have a light, for those who have gone hiking late at night, this can potentially be frustrating. But if you have a lantern, you are very able to see everything around you more. But you're actually able to see stuff in the dark less. If you turn off the lamp, you can kind of figure some of those things in the distance a little bit better. And this is where we trick ourselves as Christians, right? We try to say, I want to see what's out there better. I want to see what's 100 steps ahead better. And then we fall off a cliff because we weren't looking where our feet were walking, right? Like we were looking at the long game and forgot to just take care of our own business. That this clarity is moment to moment clarity. Jesus isn't going to tell you everything's going to be fine. He's not going to show you what your kids are going to be like, 21 years from now. right? Whatever those issues may be when you have a baby, right? But he can if you're just like, man, it's crying, I'm not sure. That those are the moments that we have the clarity in. And I just like this verse a lot, because while people might say like, well, it makes further things further away, that's harder to see. But I think that that's kind of what Jesus wants, right? Like, worry about that distant future a lot less, and worry about what's going on in your immediate vicinity a lot more. Worry about what's you can actually impact more. Worry about that next step, and you'll get to the top of the mountain. Don't just fixate on top of the mountain the entire time. Aaron, any thoughts about this?
No, I don't have any thoughts on this one.
Okay. Ben, your thoughts?
I was just for so much of my life, I actually thought that verse was actually talking about the Bible. The Bible is, and that's why I was taught it as, just like John 1. But that's not what that is it? That's the Holy Spirit, or that's Jesus.
Your word, the word of God, we're told in John, is Jesus. That's correct.
So yes. Would that be the same word here?
So we actually have Jesus talk about in the reading several times this week, mention that when David said this, he was talking about Jesus. So while I would say this is an Old Testament verse, and it's very likely that it's talking about Scripture, we have many, many, many instances where Jesus is like, no, he's actually talking about right here and now with Jesus. So I guess I'll be honest, probably debatable either way. Okay. But yeah, that's what it is there. And I think whether it's the Bible or Jesus, I think it's the same thing. It's meant for immediate area illumination as opposed to, clairvoyance of the future. Now I know, Aaron, you got a late break. Did you have any Bible verses for us this week? That's okay.
I didn't. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's okay. No worries. Ben, did you have anything from the reading? Because I got plenty, but I figured I'd offer.
No, you go for it.
All right. I get the gig.
You know my crazy life the last few weeks.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm just grateful to have you back, because I know what it entails to have you at all. You and Aaron both, actually. I can tell it's like, man, got work, got family, got stuff, but I'll make time for this. I definitely appreciate you guys both doing that. And hello, everybody. We got a good amount of viewers here. I always appreciate when we got a good amount of viewers, and the numbers always seem to go higher and higher.
I was just about to ask, do we have any comments from Bray? And then I remembered they're not going to be here today. So
Bray, I know he's working. Like, no.
Speaking of people who couldn't be here today, Bray, you are very missed.
Very missed.
Let's see here. I had one here. The meaning is pretty simple, but it's when Jesus is getting smacked around for telling the truth about God being the Father. And Jesus replied, if I said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I'm speaking the truth, why are you beating me? And I like this whole, like, if you had to resort to punching me in the face, like if I said something stupid, you would just tell me why it's stupid, right? As soon as you have to resort to violence, you've lost the logic, right? Like, you're not able to defeat him logically. So you had to defeat him violently. It's something it's like
that viral. Yeah, it's that viral meme about dealing with your kids. Like if your kids are talking back to you or something like that, then use reason. And if they don't understand reason, then they're not going to understand violence either, because they just think that a larger person is beating me up because they're bigger than me. Yeah,
it's yeah, I mean, the verse stands on its own. It's funny because I actually was just about to go into kind of like our modern usage of it, but yeah, that's exactly it. We make memes about this kind of thing. Like, it's like, if you had to punch me to shut me up instead of just like debate me, or like attack my ideas, if you had to resort to attacking me physically, doesn't say a whole lot about your ideas. And Jesus, I will say this, and please forgive me, it's a bit of a joke and maybe a sacrilegious one, but you can tell why they hit him again after this. Because when people, it's like telling somebody to calm down when they're not calm, right? Like, it's just, that's not going to work. So if it's just like, if they're already beating you and you're like, you wouldn't beat me if I wasn't telling the truth, you're just going to get beat harder. And that's what they did, because Jesus was that right. So forgive me for the bad joke, but yeah. Ben, anything that you wanted to add with this one?
Sorry, my phone, my daughter was calling, so I had to
good.
step out there for a second.
You're okay. You're okay. We'll do. I got one of us here, and I like this verse. It's from. We've actually read several verses in the Old Testament that are kind of. I think when we think of universalism and the idea that everybody goes to heaven eventually, we've mentioned the New Testament a lot. But here's one from the Old Testament that I really love, and it's specifically talking about our post-death era. And it says, all of us must die eventually. Our lives are like waters spilled out on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. But God does not just sweep life away. Instead, he devises ways to bring us back when we have been separated from him. And this idea that we're in this post-spilled out state, that we're dead, right? We already have died eventually. That God is, I like the word devise. He's figuring out a way how to get you back. Too often we think of God as like, oh, you did the wrong thing. You didn't make it into heaven. God's not trying to craft ways that you don't get into heaven. He's trying to craft ways that you do. And so for even people who died in disbelief, the water spilled out on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again in this life to us, right? Like we're just like, that's gone. It's gone. That God is still working on a way to figure that out. So there will be people, right, that it's like, man, they were a waste. That's too bad. They died in disbelief, whatever. They died with hate in their hearts or with sin or whatever. That God is actually devising ways. And I believe last I checked, God's pretty good at succeeding at things. That's 2 Samuel 14:14, by the way, for those who would like to look that one up. Just for the context of that one. But yeah, I really... I guess any thoughts you guys have either about that verse specifically or about universalism in general?
I've come to the idea now that like I'm so pro universalism that I can't conceive of a just God that isn't also a universalist. I don't know if that's considered heresy to some, but like to me, I can't. It's not conceivable. I mean, it might be I might end up dying someday and finding out that that's not the case, and that there's a good reason for it somehow. But like, I can't conceive of it on Earth. So,
I've been a little bit of a universalist, and I think going through the Bible this year has kind of shocked me how many verses there are that have kind of confirmed that for me. It feels like one of those, like it's a wishful thinking thing when you go into the Bible. And believe me, getting through all the genocide again, there's a lot of wishful thinking I had that didn't pan out well. But in the case of like universalism, this is one that like the more I read, the more I'm like, oh yeah. Ben, your thoughts?
So universalism is still something so new for me. It's a new concept for me. I just never even considered it as an option. Because I grew up under this teaching of God is looking forward to casting you into hell. God's looking forward to judging you wicked evil sinner. And so to see things through a different light, a complete different filter. Like I have new glasses. These are progressive lenses that are bifocal. And so it took me a while to get adjusted to them, but now that I'm adjusted to them, I can't operate without them. But I can see things so much differently, and that's where I think I am on universalism. Is I'm still at the stage where there's still a lot of things out of focus, but yeah, I'm willing to keep doing the work because it's the only thing that's making sense to the very character of God. That he doesn't want it, because as a parent, no matter what my children do, no matter what any of them do, I'm going to do anything I can to love them, to protect them, to support them, because I love my children. And when they do something that's foolish or harming them, I mean, it just breaks my heart. I feel pain in the very core of my heart, worrying about a child, like hoping that child will come around, because from a bad decision. And it's like, man, if that's what I'm going through as a parent, I can't imagine what what God the Father is going through, because he wants to see us restored, period. He's not trying to put me into a car. I was literally petrified that I was going to be in a car accident and be a paraplegic the rest of my life because of these sermons that were preached about how God can't wait to break your leg or make you a quadriplegic because you are rebelling against God, or you're not obeying the man of God, or you're rebelling against your parents. And so this whole, it's beautiful to me, but I'm still like at that beginning stage, like he really seriously just loves me, period, and wants me to be restored. Like he's not trying to take the lamb, the story of the 99. And I don't know how many stories you guys have heard how he would the shepherd would break the lamb's leg and make it so he couldn't leave again. He would break their leg and so I was scared to death that God was going to break my leg. So this is new for me, but I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a same journey for me. Believed in heaven and hell so hard that it's like I kind of needed, well, and I still believe in heaven and hell to be sure. I just believe that everybody ends up in the former, rather than the latter. Yeah, eventually. But there is I think I was so used to the idea that some people are damned for all time and had just assumed that that's the way it was, that even after reading like Bible verses and stuff that say otherwise, it requires like not only a mountain of them, but it requires like me to sit with them for a bit before I'm like, really though, let me chew on this for a while, before it kind of becomes true. And I'll admit that I'm not stubborn. I pride myself in like open thinking and I'm almost paranoid. I remember reading this thing. It's like, as you get older in life, you're less neurologically inclined to find different things. That I was so paranoid that it's like, oh, I don't want to be closed-minded just because I'm getting older. So I like challenge myself to think open-mindedly. But even then, I admit that like these long-held beliefs take a while, sometimes without any new information. I just need to sit with them for a minute. And
yeah,
definitely the standard view, the universalist view, I think takes, if you're not a universalist, takes a hot minute to chew on. And a few examples from the Bible.
It's directly connected to the topic of fear that we were talking about too. But also with universalism is it changes your mindset. Like you think of someone that you are strongly against, so that you like, let's say it's a pedophile, like, man, I hope they rot in hell forever. And how many times have I said that? And then I'll read a verse like this and I'm like, whoa. So I want my, like me as a sexual abuse survivor, I'm at that stage of, I don't want to hate my abusers, and I don't want to see them in hell like I wanted to most of my life. And so it's all interconnected. So it just adds another layer of having to contemplate and stew on it. That's my point.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're at where you're at, and I think wrestling with it is something we even talked about this. Unfortunately, you weren't there, Ben, but Aaron and I had a good discussion about how we're meant to wrestle with things as opposed to just be served them up. So it's you're on the right path. We have more appreciation for the stuff we wrestle with. It's whenever somebody's like, "I've always believed this," like it's cool. Like if that's the right place, like I'm glad, but there is like a certain lack of depth sometimes to those types of opinions.
A sword that hasn't been tempered.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I know I quote this all the time, right? I guess not quote, but I say this all the time. But there's a reason they have the interventions led by somebody who's had to do it before, right? Like it's just you can have all the knowledge that person has, but there's just a piece that's missing, unless you've done it yourself. C.S. Lewis said, like, I don't, when he did Mere Christianity, they were like, why don't you have a chapter about like the evils of gambling? And C.S. Lewis like, I've never struggled with it, so I don't feel qualified to talk about how to tell people to overcome it, right? Versus like, lust and lying. Oh yeah, those for sure, right? Like I can talk on those, but if you haven't struggled with it, if you don't understand, you just sound completely
Goes back to that brief conversation we had right before we went on air about the fact that, like you can't protect your kids like 100% from going through the same stuff that you had because they haven't experienced it. Oh.
Yeah. This segues very nicely into something else I wanted to talk about with Psalms. So we get this juxtaposition with David, where in life, he is almost like comically merciful to his enemies, not wanting to hunt them down. He, when there's a rebellion, he removes himself from the city so that the city's not in danger, so that the rebellion can attack him alone, right? Like, and then when the rebellion falls apart, he's like, but I don't want the people who rebelled to be punished or killed for what they did. There's like an absurd level of like the compassion David has for his enemies. And this actually extends to his army itself. And there's a, I don't know if we want to get into it, but there's a multicultural element that we have to talk about here, that the people against him were nationalists. And David's like, Ishmaelite, cool. Amalekite, cool. Moabite, cool. They're all in my army, right? Like, he had a multicultural, multiracial, multinational army, and the people who opposed him were ethnocentrists. And that view of Judaism was opposed to what God's actual view of Judaism was. So while we have David being a good guy, and again, log that away if you guys want to comment about it, you can when I give you a sec here. But the thing about the Psalms is they're incredibly vindictive. Like they're break my enemy's teeth in their mouth, break their bones, shatter their skulls under your feet. Like, God, bring them to justice, bring the anger. And we're going to talk about this, especially when we get into Lamentations, which, by the way, if you think the Song of Songs is the most controversial book of the Bible, you have not read Lamentations, and I can basically guarantee it. That is some very angry with God. And so but the thing is like, God wants your unfiltered feelings with him. When you approach God, God wants you to say how you feel, not how you're supposed to feel, right? Like when you go up to God, God doesn't want your curated 5th edition response, your proofread, I submitted to my brother and now I'm submitting it to you response. God wants you. God wants the genuine you, the you that's wishing for your enemy's teeth to break. Because what we have with David is a guy that, because he's able to vent to God and get those feelings out there, then in practice, he's able to be a peaceful man. Like, if we can't be honest to God about the violence or the anger, the hatred, the lust, the deceit, whatever it is in our hearts, then we're going to struggle with that outside. Whereas if we bring all that before God, and it's embarrassing, dude, I get it. Like, I totally understand wanting to live a curated life in front of God. I don't want to think of God as somebody sitting there watching all the sins that I commit, but he is, right? And so the more honest I am with him there, the more I can temper out those problems. And so then when I'm out in the actual world, I'm less prone to making those errors because I got to be so honest with God about it and craft a solution with him behind closed doors, that when I'm out in public, I actually get to do the right thing. It's I like I think Lamentations and Psalms are important to have in the Bible, despite how let's just be honest, they preach some bad theology, right? But God's not interested in your correctitude. He's interested in how you feel. The story of Lamentations, literally grieving, right? Like, God wants to know the depths of your anger and sorrow while you're in the depths of your anger and sorrow. Approach him at those points, be straight up, tell him how you feel. If we're talking Lamentations, say, God, I don't like you anymore. I don't, why did you do this, right? Like, I disagree with all of your decisions. I feel used. I feel this. God wants to hear that from you. He doesn't want to hear of course you're God all the time and I really love you. There's a couple of things. No, if you feel angry, let it out. God doesn't want curated you. He wants real life you. Ben, any thoughts you have about that?
Learning that it's okay to talk to God I just recently did a post on that. I don't know if you read that post. Is just where I'm at a stage where I'm asking God all kinds of questions. You liked it, so I don't know if you read it or not, but
I'm I'm positive I did.
But
me
that
just
was one of the things that brought us. Like, I'm at this point where, I mean, I'm asking God questions, and I'm realizing I don't have the black and white anymore. And there's days I struggle with anger towards my abuser, or anger towards someone that's hurt me, or even anger towards myself for my own toxic choices or unhealthy choices that have caused so much harm in my life. And you almost get like just so angry at everything, and realizing you could talk to God about that, and you could literally just be angry and be in the moment with him. And that's new for me, man. It is so new for me. But I'm finding it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful being able to talk to God in the moment. And I'm finding that there's an intimacy with it. And now I'm not talking a sexual intimacy. I'm talking about a deep intimacy with when you're talking to the Father, and you're filled with I don't know questions. Like, I don't have the answer. I don't know, and I don't know what to do. And you give me the Bible, and the Bible's not making any sense with this topic. So, and the more I contemplate on it, the more questions I have. And that's what's happening in my life. The more I contemplate on a lot of things, as I'm kind of, I think I'm just starting to reconstruct the more I look at it. And I have more questions than I have any answer. In fact, I barely have any answers. It's all questions. In fact, and then when I have a question, I end up asking a question on top of that question, which causes a question on top of that question, and then it's a cycle of questions. But as I'm asking these questions and I'm venting to God, I'm finding myself wanting more of God, which is so new to me, because he has just always been this guy I'm trying to earn his favor and be a good guy. So I'm going to be a good Christian. Now I'm like, I'm barely a Christian. If you want to call me a Christian, whatever. I'm just here. I'm his child, and I know that I'm his child. Period. It's I don't know if I'm making any sense there, but yet when you look at Psalms, David, I mean, he had some real issues about not liking people, and wanting them to be, what's the one? May their days be few. In other words, he's wishing death on his enemies, and that's the one you see Christians will. I can't believe how many times I saw Christians post that about Joe Biden. They would quote that verse. And I'm like, where we're using those verses to express our anger. I don't know if it's wrong to do that or not, but I think it's using things out of context for one. But
I mean, I'm guilty of that myself. Where there's
But-
a particular meme of putting pray for Trump, and then it gives a Bible verse, and the Bible verse is specifically "May his days be few," and something like that.
That's the verse I'm talking about. I can't remember if
Yeah.
David wrote that verse. I can't remember off the top of my head if that's in Psalms.
Yeah.
But yeah, David, I've said often in the last couple of years, I said the book of Psalms has told me that David had mental health issues. And that has encouraged me as a guy that struggles with mental health issues. That, I mean, here it is. I mean, it's very clear. If you look at the book of Psalms from an open mind, and you start to really look at what he's saying, I mean, the guy clearly had anxiety. He clearly battled horrible depression. He battled anger. Plus he had sexual addiction issues. So David was just a guy that really messed up his life, but yet he repented of all of it, and God said he's a man after his own heart. I still don't fathom that, to be honest with you, because that kind of goes against everything we've been taught in American evangelical Christianity. So.
Yeah, I love both your thoughts on that one, guys. I really appreciate it.
Well, you were talking about having raw opinions of God. What it reminded me of is this conversation that I'm a YouTube addicted, and so I'm watching a pair of YouTube therapists having a conversation about various topics. And one of the topics that they're talking about is Princess Mononoke, the movie. If you're not familiar with it, Ben, it's an anime movie. It's a Studio Ghibli.
And it's cute.
Yeah,
Everybody should
yeah.
watch it.
It's a very good movie. And specifically, they're talking about Ashitaka and how he's like the paragon of positive masculinity. And they talk about his reactions in the movie, and they really get deep into this is how it's on topic, how he filters his actions. Like he doesn't, it's not that he's some sort of moral paragon that doesn't have negative opinions, like doesn't have negative beliefs and everything like that. It's that he's prudent enough to give himself the moment to think about things. And they specifically called attention to the scene where he's in Irontown in front of the leper community, and he's talking to Eboshi, and he's about to draw his sword. Like his hand actually goes to his sword hilt, and he's like struggling with his arm because he wants to kill her because she's so evil in his opinion. But he gives himself the moment to stifle that and come up with a more diplomatic solution. And I thought that was on point for the discussion that we're having about filtering our raw emotions through God instead of just trying to like form a curated version of what we should be saying to him, and letting him be the one to be a whetstone to our opinions, and try to come up with a more filtered and wholesome approach rather than our base impulses.
Yeah, I like what you say there. A lot of what we do, the base impulse can be wrong. I take that to be kind of like lean not on our own understanding, like the reactionaryism. Like I honestly believe that unless you're trans, you probably had a weird reaction to hearing about trans stuff for the first time, right? Like it just doesn't jive with your understanding. It just doesn't. But then you take a moment, you do a little bit of research, and you're like, okay, all right, I see it. I get it now, right? Similarly, like, honestly, the Earth flying around the sun at whatever bajillion miles an hour we're flying at or whatever, that doesn't feel right either. Right? Like, I get why, like, a lot of the earliest, like, religions thought that the Earth was at the center. It feels that way, right? But, like, the truth is sometimes something that makes us go like, oh, I actually need to look at this for a second. So I agree with what you say.
I mean, I had it on, I was going to say I had it on easy mode because, prior to the event happening, I was conservative, Republican, listening to talk radio and Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and everything like that about how evil trans people were. But when they were relatively small, and they were called more slur-like terms on the radio openly and everything like that. But like, when I said I had it on easy mode, I had my best friend come out as trans, and that nothing will fast forward your progress on understanding trans people than like having somebody that you actually care about come out as trans, because you can't immediately demonize them. Like it's easy to demonize the other when the other is somebody that you have no emotional connection to. But when they come out as somebody that like somebody personally, as say for instance Palestinian, it's like it's kind of hard to demonize them.
Yeah. Let's see here. Got another one here. All right. So this is one that we have unfortunately, we're getting into a lot of like liberty stuff today. I always try to get away from that because I want to welcome everybody, but this just happens this way. We have no king but Caesar, the leading priest shouting back.
Yeah.
This is something that is horrifyingly embarrassing. That these are the people who preached that for the longest time that Caesar was not king of the Jews.
Right.
That they don't recognize him as a king. And for all my disagreements with the Pharisees, them loving Rome is not one of them. They certainly were the one. There's the reason there were zealots in the area, right? Like the Pharisees certainly recognized that Rome was an illegal occupying force, that they were supposed to be a theocratic state, of their own leadership, and that Rome was an installment that was counter to God in this way. And here we have Jesus, a man that threatens them so much that they are willing to they're willing to betray something that they know at their core level to be fundamentally untrue, that they had preached to be untrue, in order to try and twist the logic to get rid of Jesus, to be like, no, our king is Caesar. Because if we say Caesar's not our king, as we have been, well, then Jesus being king of the Jews doesn't really matter to us, right?
Right.
And so we have to suddenly embrace Caesar, pledge our allegiance to Caesar, because we want this guy dead so bad.
While in the same mouth professing that they want Barabbas back, who was a revolutionary. So like Correct. Literally like, yeah, we're Caesar, all Caesar, go keep Caesar, but also we want the revolutionary.
Right. If we're getting one guy out of prison, let's get the guy who is against Caesar out of prison, right? Like the guy who's in prison for being against Caesar out of prison. Yeah, there is no morality among the Pharisees. Like they pretend a lot, especially with the Bible. John, especially this week's reading, we went into a lot of detail about the Pharisees and what they were doing to try and get rid of Jesus, to try and maintain their own power, really, their own stranglehold. And it's a small fish, small pond kind of thing, obviously, when we're looking at it in a global sense. But this is their pond. This is the one that they want to own. They don't want anybody encroaching on it. They especially don't want a personal liberator, an individualist liberator like Jesus in there. And so they are willing to side with Rome, to plead to Pontius Pilate. As we've already talked about before, this entire crucifixion process, including what we read this week, getting him down from the cross, they wanted the arrest to death to all happen before the Jews woke up and stopped them. If you really want to put a dent in that whole the Jews killed Jesus thing, read the Gospel of John, because it's so clear what the Pharisees have to do to get the Jews to not interfere with them, because they love Jesus so much. And so they, midnight hours, arrest on sunset when most people are asleep, death, have him off the cross before everybody wakes up, get him in this field, and then nobody will know what we did, right? Or at least it'll be too late, and we can always justify our actions later, I'm opening up several boxes here, but I do want to say, I think that this is something that we kind of think is unique to this event. But we have seen, especially recently, people selling out to Caesar, selling out to a throne, when we know they don't believe in that concept of the throne. They've said it before. They've announced it before. I'm thinking of one guy in particular in our liberty movement who I used to cite. He's always been a right libertarian, but he was always staunchly he was actually for police prohibition. And so I saved his work because I was like, oh, I really, this is a good way to get right wingers on board with, abolishing the police. And since that's something I believe in too, it was fortuitous. But I checked his page and it's nothing but pro cop, pro ICE, pro arrest the immigrants, pro arrest the judges. He took the knee to Caesar in order to gain more personal power, and his philosophy's destroyed. He's got more viewers, I guess, but it goes back to the whole, if I gain the whole world, lose my soul, what have I really profited, And it's just there are people who will unfortunately trade their souls in for a few more likes on Facebook, and all it takes is just a little kneeling to Caesar. This is the thing that Jesus was tempted with. Obviously, Jesus didn't find it very tempting, but this is the thing they approached Jesus with too. And how many times do we see this throne of Caesar in our lives, and people willing to take that knee to Caesar in order to get something they want done, even though they know it's highly unethical. You want Jesus gone. And so they're willing to kneel to Caesar. These people want these immigrants gone. And so all of a sudden, well, maybe I don't care about spending as much as I used to anymore, right? Like, because, hey, if it gets rid of these people, what were all the rest of my morals anyway? Trade them in, So anyhow, your thoughts there. Aaron, we'll start with you.
Well, I was going to say, boy, howdy, do we have stuff to talk about when we get to current events? Because, my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
That's a huge kerfuffle.
Indeed.
Yeah, I don't have anything profound to say.
Okay. Ben, any thoughts you have?
I was just literally just pondering this week. People that I know that are devout, passionately devout evangelical Christians, like that are involved in not just various different denominations, but they're passionate. They're very, very super spiritual, but yet I see them literally bowing and almost worshiping President Trump, and I can't seem to wrap my head around it. It's the same thing as what you're saying about worshiping Caesar. They're literally having to go against everything that they have taught on so many levels, not everything, but many levels of what they've taught and that they say they believe. They're having to, I would say an example of that would be Glenn Beck, who I don't really follow. I used to follow Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, all of them. But, Glenn Beck has had to sell his soul because he became an avid Trump supporter. But he used to be one of those ones that was totally against the behaviors, all of it. And he's got the viewership now and he's got the following, but the guy sold his soul to get there.
Yep.
As I think is a great example. And
half of Trump's team is like people that formerly called him a Nazi 5 years ago.
Yes. I've lost faith in believing what people say anymore overall, because that are like in leadership positions and things, because actions always speak louder than words, and we're seeing actions that are opposite, polar opposites of what they have been saying for years, and now I can't wrap my head around it. It's so bad.
What happened to inflation after the Inflation Reduction Act again?
Yeah, it's so bad. I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah. Bray said dropping by to say what up, fam, and then all right back to work. Sorry, you're probably back to work already, but hopefully you feel a jolt of love while you're working wherever you are.
Yeah, it's like your ears are burning, except it's a good feeling.
Yeah, good ears burning feeling. Of course, we all know what that feels like.
But the biggest thing though is these pastors who are devout in their particular denomination, and they're I know some independent fundamental Baptist preachers who are very, very, very super spiritual, and yet they are passionately behind President Trump. I think that has bothered me over all of it, is the pastors that have, because that is exactly, I literally said this. I said they are yelling, "Give us Caesar," and it's almost blasphemy.
One of the few human people that Jesus was overly contemptuous of were Christians who were leading other Christians astray, or biblical leaders that were leading other Christians, religious people astray. I shouldn't say Christians before there was a Christian, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah. We're getting into that part in Acts, which is kind of exciting. All right, I had a lot of other stuff to say, but I know we want to do current events, so I'm just going to end with one more. The Pentecost. is the most documented of all the miracles in the Bible. Historically speaking, this was very public. This was something that really, when you trace back Christian origins, and you actually see the numbers even in the Bible, that it goes from like 106 to like several thousand after this event, and it becomes global as a result of this. Obviously, I invite skepticism. You could always claim that the disciples paid a lot of money to have a lot of foreigners in the same spot to pretend they all heard the same words to whatever. I listened to actually two atheists talk about the hardest things to debunk about the Bible recently, and this was their second to highest one, because it just is so documented and would have required such an extreme level of coordination. And most of the time, even like the atheists themselves, one of the things they struggled with was they felt the disciples were like good people that were just kind of being misled about divinity. And in this case, they would have to do a serious, like this would break that narrative for them a bit, because they would have to be, committing some serious, what's it called? Where you fake, you're charlatanism. Yeah. They'd have to be committing some serious charlatanism then to be pretending to do this miracle. It would require a lot to pull off.
When you get an opportunity, can you link that discussion? Because that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I think I already did. I think it was it's Rhett when he talks about losing his faith with Alex O'Connor. I'll try to link it again.
Oh yeah, no, I watched that. But I don't think that they covered that subject.
Did they not cover that one? Okay, I'm thinking of different too.
There's a breaking news article just came out in the last hour about Michael Tate. You know who the Newsboys?
I know Michael Tate really well. DC Talk, Newsboys, yeah.
Yeah, guess what just came out? Former Newsboys frontman Michael Tate groomed and sexually assaulted multiple victims after a years-long investigation that involved over 50 sources. He also has significant alcohol and substance abuse.
Yeah, don't have any heroes.
He's one of my favorites. I think I've even shared like song of his.
Well, he's not the only one. I was listening to another YouTube video breaking down all of the very credible, based off the way she was talking, allegations against Dan Price, the best CEO in the world or whatever, the guy who like raised his employees' wages to like $70,000.
Oh yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. Apparently, he's a real asshole. Like so many credible sexual assault allegations. Very credible rape allegation. The fact that almost everything that he did with his employees was manufactured to specifically get him out of trouble. Like it was like he bought himself a Tesla at one point and then had his employees manufacture a story that they bought it for him because they were so grateful for what he did.
Gosh.
And like,
how vain can you be?
The only reason that he even did the initial thing that made him so famous of like lowering his salary to $70,000 and raising his employee's salary up to $70,000 was because he was trying to get out of fraud allegations. And he thought that like story would bury the lead so much on the fraud allegations that he could he could get out of it. Like he just a general jerk, which is really unfortunate because, as you said with Michael Tate, I've shared multiple posts of Dan Price, like and honoring his sacrifice for his employees and everything like that before I found out that the story was complete bogus.
Man, I didn't. And I've got a picture here of Michael Tate on the screen for those who are watching. I didn't know he went Trump. It's so weird because Kevin Max and Toby Mac went the other way from DC Talk. And I just assumed, I mean, dude, even the songs that he has are like racism is still present and it matters. And like, I guess I didn't know the guy's soul. I guess. Sorry, what were you gonna say, Ben?
I just sent you the on Messenger. Check your messenger. I just sent you the link from Roy's report. But this is one of the things that I've been tracking, and this is one of the struggles I've been having with Christianity. This is not the first. I mean, we're in the hundreds now of pastors, leaders, worship leaders that's coming out that they're just filled with rampant sexual abuse, physical abuse, and financial abuse, and that they're just total assholes. And it's like, how in the world is this all called worship? And all of this is so super spiritual when behind the scenes, all these guys are just horrible humans. And it's just, I'm really struggling over it all. I really am.
It's almost like, how can God be real if he allows so many people that speak in his name to be so terrible? Like, you get that thought process in your head. I've worked through that myself in the sense that, like,
I'm still in it. I'm struggling there, and I'll be honest, I'm really struggling.
Yeah.
Just like the one of the lead singers in the group, the band that was down there at Answers to Genesis, which I'm very much against Answers, but the Ark, and they were the band that was that stayed on site, and the one lead singer was the piano player, lead singer was he's a pedophile and a rapist.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to a couple of different things to me personally as I'm working through that, which is, first off, the fact that at no point in biblical history was the priesthood ever completely legitimate, in the sense that, like, they were actually, that they were actually above board. And so if it can happen during Jesus's time, if it happens during all of the Old Testament, then why should we expect anything different of our priesthood? At the same time, you have to have discernment. People have free will, and so they have to exercise the free will. But that's one of the biggest reasons that leads me towards universalism, is if people have only ever been exposed to Christianity as this flawed evangelical cluster, then it's almost like the uncontacted tribe in the Amazonian rainforest that's going to go to heaven because they haven't had an opportunity to learn of Jesus. Well, like, Americhristians haven't had the opportunity to learn of Jesus, even though they have the book and they have, the resources to learn. They've been presented with this false narrative that's so powerful. It's almost like they're the uncontacted tribe, even though they're living right in the heart of what supposedly is Christianity.
I mean, earthly authority, especially Christian earthly authority, or Jewish earthly authority, or Judeo-Christian, I guess in our case, needs to be the most transparent, the most accountable. Story after story, like you mentioned, Aaron, from the get-go, this was a problematic thing. It's not like we set it up really well and things messed up. Like, it was messed up from the beginning, and just goes to show how delicate this good leadership is, and how important it is to keep that in step, and the constant reminder of humility that they need to have. I don't think it's any accident. We've been reading about how anybody that's called to a priesthood in this faith sells all their possessions, gives up everything, lives at the grace of the people that they are serving and witnessing to. Like, because as soon as they start to get a house, a book deal, stuff, like,
they're done. They're ruined.
It's over. Like, it's just, and I don't want to obviously we talked about Peter Enns earlier. I'm not dissing everybody who's had that, but that's simply, you got to be under the radar as soon as that happens, and you've got to realize it and be hyper aware of it. And I think know yourself well enough to counter it, and to get people that will hold you accountable if you don't hold yourself accountable, to say, listen, guys, keep me honest, keep me on track here. Right. Like, let me know that I'm doing the right thing. we're well and truly into current events. Now that we've been talking about Michael Tett, that's about as current as it gets too. That was just like an hour ago. Ben, I appreciate you being all over that one. While not good news, news
I'm
that
blown away by it. I'm absolutely blown away.
Aaron, you said you had a news story for us, and I'd love to discuss it.
Oh, what was it that I wanted to talk about? I'm trying to.
Something about kneeling to Caesar in order to get rid of something that you kneel to Caesar because you're so scared of the immigrants, and so you're willing to take the debt. That's kind of what I felt.
Oh,
like you said.
No. It was the big. I mean, it was because I see that you put it as the title of the video. One beautiful big real disaster. It's the feud that's going on between Trump and Elon right now.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, not necessarily Trump directly, because I don't think Trump's been informed that there's a feud going on yet. Like, I think his staff is trying to keep him out of it, because I think that if he gets involved, it's going to be a huge flare up and it's going to go on for forever. But yeah,
Sure.
No, there is a major blow up between Elon Musk, who is pissed off that his little pet project of Doge is being completely it's being completely sidelined by Republican Congress to push a massive spending increase, which is the absolute opposite of Doge. And I don't think that Republicans ever actually cared about Doge. It was always just a marketing ploy. And
Same.
like Elon was put in
Absolutely a marketing ploy. Absolutely.
He was put in a little sandbox, and he was told, "Okay, you can play now and have fun." Because he dumped a whole bunch of money into the Republican campaign, so he can't be completely sidelined, because he had to be given a little special project just for special Elon boy. But now his usefulness has expired, because he's already given the money now, so there's no reason to continue to cater to him. And he's pissed, which
He is very pissed.
I think is hilarious.
I predicted it was going to last a couple months, and it's been what?
It hasn't lasted that
couple months.
Yeah. It's like two arrogant, prideful men who are just so full of themselves. It wasn't going to work.
So with this one here, I do think there's some okay, I'm not taking I think there's an issue when we try to take somebody back. Now listen, I don't want to, if we can build the bridge with Elon Musk for the sake of his soul and for the sake of us as human beings, and he's one of God's children and we should love him, absolutely. I do think that we should encourage him to get on a repentance process, but I will say that repentance process is going to be a bit steep, and that's not because I want it to be. That's not my grudge against him that makes it steep. I've had to climb a steep hill myself. It's simply that when you dig yourself this deep, this is how it goes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd love to see him make that turnaround, but I think the far more likely outcome is the Candace Owen, Kanye West route, where he just gets worse. Like he just gets even worse than Trump. But I'd love to see the redemption arc. I don't believe in it, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I think he's upset because there's a difference between like principles. Like it's the whole "we are not the same" meme, right? Like he's against Trump because Trump canceled his project and made it look stupid. I'm against Trump because he's like a big government authoritarian. We're not the same. And Trump is, I will say, Elon Musk, to his credit, is he kind of said like one thing and then like 5 things and then like 20 things. And it's just like he's commenting on posts, he's posting replies. He's like, we should primary all the people that voted, all the Republicans who voted for it. He had 1 Republican vote no, so 50 Republican, like primary all 50 Republicans, calling them traitors, right?
Well,
like this in the Senate.
I don't think it's gone through the Senate yet. It's only gone through the House, right?
Or the House, right? Okay, yeah, my mistake there.
It's
even Marjorie Greene, who I can't fathom, but Marjorie Greene even said, "Oh man, I didn't read this thing and I voted for it, and it's bad."
I actually did read the entire thing, all 1,000 pages. The margin, if you haven't read a bill before, I read it on the .gov site, and the margins are like, they're super thin. If it was like an actual like printable book, it would be like, I don't know, like 8 inches tall by like 2 inches wide. Like it would be the most preposterously sized book. So 1,000 pages obviously is still not good. We don't want omnibus bills because they sneak through all kinds of terrible things. There's a ton of terrible stuff in here when you dig into it. But it isn't as bad. Like if I read 1,000 page like Ayn Rand book, suddenly I'm gone for months, right? Versus whereas this one I actually was able to do in like I think it took me almost exactly 24 hours from when I started. I didn't sleep. I did skimp some sleep. I still did like in fact I had this group, I think. So last Wednesday I did this. So I think I actually attended this. Anyway. So there's a lot I have to say about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It is because there's just so many different facets of it. But the idea that I can't think of how you expected something different as a Republican, because he did vow to not trump Medicare and Medicaid. In fact, that's expanding, and it did. He vowed to expand military spending, and it did. ICE and the IRS are essentially two new branches of the military. With the power that they would, I guess, if it were to pass, would be given in this bill. It expands. I mean, just for this year alone, it needs another $4 trillion. Like that's the very last. He's not trying to bury that at all, right? Literally, it's the last section of the entire act is the increase in the debt by $4 trillion. But I don't know what they thought it was going to be. Like I like it was heavily anti-immigrant, and it is. It cuts some like environmental stuff, I guess.
Well, so and that's the thing. Like that's one of the things that I was wanting to talk about, is specifically as it pertains to Musk and the feud that's going on right now. Is that Mike Johnson was interviewed about Elon Musk's betrayal. You know, like Musk being on the quote unquote good side of this issue. And Mike Johnson came up with a very interesting scapegoat for Trumpers to hate Musk, which was that Musk is just mad because his EV subsidies are going away, which is a fascinating line of attack, because everybody has been talking about how Musk is like with Doge is avoiding cutting his own corporate subsidies.
Yep.
You know, and how hypocritical he is. And Republicans are constantly like pushing away from that and everything like that. But the moment that Musk goes rogue, that's the first line of attack that they use, which is just fascinating levels of hypocrisy. But, you know, it's what we've come to expect.
Yeah, right. It's like, okay, we'll downsize some things, and the very limited things are like environment, and that's one thing that like Tesla was capitalizing on, as you mentioned. Yeah, that is part of it. The other part of it is there is actually an extra fee if you drive an electric or hybrid vehicle. Just flat out in this bill, it's in addition to the fee that you pay to getting your car registered, applied by the federal government.
As a result of the oil and gas industry, because they're not getting as much gas revenue because of all these electric vehicles.
The protectionism in this bill for oil and natural gas is unreal. They're actually required like to sell a certain amount to the states. And so it's like, even if you find a better alternative energy, we still have to buy this amount of oil and natural gas. It's unreal. All land like that they're bidding on, big oil gets first dibs, small oil gets second dibs, and if you choose to pay untold amounts of fees, they might expedite an application to be third after those two. Literally, those both get to bid first. Then anybody else can come, or somebody else, sorry, not anybody, somebody else can come in on the bidding. But I think the application's like $1 million or 10 million or something to even try to put a bid on the land. So even if you wanted like hey, our town wants to do like a green farm, well, your town better have $10 million it's ready to give to the federal government just to apply to get that green farm going, right? If you wanted to do any windmills or solar panels or anything like that. Like it is it is unreal. I could talk about this forever. I mean, we're talking about protectionism, food, minimum for very first section of the bill. So this one's not buried. Food prices, price controlled and higher than what they are currently. So you will be paying more for your food, and that's by design. And again, that's protectionism for these farm and agricultural industries.
We've talked about this last week, but just so that people are hearing that they didn't hear last week, because I want to make sure that they don't come away with the same misinterpretation that I did when I first heard this. These are not price controls to lower the cost of food. They're price controls to raise it. And that's not something that I understood for a while. Hody had to explain it to me like 3 times before I got it, because it's the opposite of what you would normally think. You would price controls to lower the cost of food make it more affordable. Yep. No, this is the opposite.
Right. When there's rent controlled housing, it's supposed to be lower than the market value of the housing. In this case, the control is to make it higher.
It's to completely screw over the average person so that his corporate subsidies,
correct,
the farming industry Monsanto can be satiated.
It's the big business fingerprints are all over this bill. Sorry, Ben, you were going to say something.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. They're literally. I read your post. I read it from top to bottom. I think like 5 times. I'm like, okay, from now on, Hody's job is to take every bill that they're trying to sneak all this shit through, and he's going to lay it out like that because it was so well done.
Yeah, you kind of have set a precedent that you have to live up to now.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. For whatever it's worth, I did do this with the Inflation Reduction Act. I did this with Build Back Better. So I have carved out a little bit of a niche for it. I had some folks over at, I had the post get shared over with some of the journalists at Reason Magazine. So we kind of talked section by section about where I found some of the things that I talked about. It also got shared, believe it or not, in a exclusively Republican journalist group. And I only know it exists because it got shared there. And I was just like, oh, okay. It was like MAGA journalists or something. And, they talked and no pushback from them. I mean, they didn't take offense at the anti-immigrant stuff the way that I do.
Right.
However, I would say that this is even a measure that they are we're taking away Medicaid benefits from people that immigrated pre-1960. Even legal immigrants they don't fully legal immigrants, not talking visas or anything like that, under this bill would never have the same rights as a full citizen when it comes to enjoying entitlements. There are just some that if you're an immigrant at all, it's stripped away from you. In addition to punitive penalties against immigrants. I mean, punitive penalties against immigrants.
I'm actually kind of curious how it'll play out for me personally, because there have been times in my life, and there could very well be times in my life in the future, that I had to go on public assistance. And my wife is an immigrant. She's a fully legal citizen now, but what is going to? I mean, are we going to qualify for federal assistance in the future? Are we going to qualify for state assistance in the future? And then I live in Texas, and Governor Abbott is trying to be as horrible as Trump. He's actively racing Trump to see which one of them can be worse.
Yeah. I'm actually talking on the Free for All tomorrow. We've got an interview with somebody out of LP, Texas, but we are talking about the slew of legislation they passed in Texas, and it's like four major bills, but all of them horrifyingly bad, and then 20 minor bills, and all those bad as well. And so there's Texas. My guess is they just got the quorum they needed of their state representatives plus the governorship or something to do whatever they wanted, as far as I know. Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
I'm sure whoever you're talking to is going to talk about this extensively, but the one that really is getting LP Texas and their hackles raised right now is the tax on third parties.
I did not see that.
Yeah, so to filing fees for third parties, there was a bill to shut it down because they got instituted like 2 years ago or 4 years ago or something like that to completely screw over third parties and make them have to pay a registration fee just to get on the ballot. That the major parties don't have, they have to raise the money, but the money that they raise can go straight back into the party again. And with the LP and the Green Party and everything like that, we have to pay the money directly to the state. And so, like $10,000 to run on the ballot is like a Senate candidate or something like that, $5,000 or whatever. And there was a major push to get that overturned and removed. And basically all the Republicans and most of the Democrats voted to keep it in place because why wouldn't they? There's no incentive for them to not do something that's patently unjust. But a lot of the LP Texas, recurring candidates and the policy wonks and everything like that were making a major push to get that overturned. Like Kevin Hale was a major component to try to. He was in the Texas legislature trying to actively campaign against it, and of course, they did the same thing that Texas always does, where they post it post that they're going to talk about it that day, and then it's almost 19 hours later. It's like 4:00 in the morning, and then they get to put it on the floor. Yeah. There was, I swear, I repeat this phrase constantly, but there's a great YouTube video that I saw from
YouTube's great, man. Don't worry about that.
From an atheist, he goes by genetically modified skeptic, which makes him sound like some sort of atheist.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's a really good YouTuber. And I'm trying to think of the exact context of this because I can't remember what the bill was about, but he documented his experience going to the state capitol, Texas state capitol, because he lives in Austin, if I remember right, to protest a bill. And they were told that it was going to be on the docket that day. And so they all showed up at like 6 a.m. He and his crew of like 50 people to all speak on this bill. And they waited over the course of like 20 hours to speak against the bill. And it just kept getting strategically pushed back and back and back and back. And it was literally like 4 a.m. Most of his group had left because they didn't give them any warning as to when the bill would be heard. So, they couldn't leave. They couldn't couldn't go anywhere to go out to get any food or anything because they could get called upon in a moment's notice. But the thing that really turned it over from being like this is bullshit to this is really bullshit is when the bill was finally heard at like 4 a.m. or something like that. They had this whole group of lobbying interests come in that had clearly been notified the bill is going to be heard in like half an hour. Make sure you come up, or whatever, because they were allowed to just come in and leave, at their leisure, whereas the regular citizen had to come in and just stay in the lobby for 20 hours or whatever, which they know damn well that the
10,000 maps, guys. This is what you're going to get with our new flash cell.
Your audio's coming in.
The chances.
I have officially been going.
I think so. Yeah, there you go. Whatever you were listening to, it was playing. I shut my brain down.
So sorry. That's disrespectful. I was trying to find your video.
That's
22 hours.
Yep.
I believe he spent here. So yeah.
I
was looking at something for a good reason. I promise.
Yeah, no. Of course, I very highly recommend watching this video. It's really, really good. It not only about the subject itself, but also the process that regular citizens have to go through in Texas just to speak in front of Congress on a topic, and how corporate lobbying works, and the fact that they could just get like a VIP. It's like going to a theme park and everybody has to wait in line except for the people who buy the express pass or whatever, and the express pass is exclusively owned by corporate lobbyists. It's just it makes our democracy democracy in quotes, such a joke.
Yeah, a lot of this was like a lot of stuff in the One Big Beautiful Bill was like this as well, where it's like if you want this, you have to pay for it. Like if you actually want expedited service, like within 60 days, you have to pay an extra absurd amount of money, right? Like if you want us to actually examine you. And this is just, I mean, unfortunately, pay to play is how politics works. I think if you go to Open Secrets, the people who spend the most money buying off politicians, I think number one is still the monopoly, the Realtor Association of America. There's a reason why house prices aren't what the market price are. Why is it you can buy, essentially what amounts to a house and plant it on a property for $10,000 on HomeDepot.com or whatever you find the right place. But as soon as you try to acquire that land, even completely unowned land, you're paying out the yang for it, right? Like there's no such thing as unowned property because it goes to them and they pay a good deal of money to make sure that they're the only ones that are allowed to barter with, you're allowed to barter with. It was FIRDAPS. I talk about this drug all the time. When there were 3 competitors allowed to make FIRDAPS, it was free. And by the way, hello, Kyle Davis. We love us, Kyle Davis. He says those some great folks right there.
Hey, Kyle.
I surely do agree with your assessment. We are quite wonderful and humble as well. No, I mean the Glasses Squad. We're good. The FIRDAPS, when there were 3 people allowed to make it, they made it for free. And you'd say, well, how did they offset the cost? By printing advertising on the bottle of the pills that they gave people. As soon as there was only one that was allowed to make the pills, it was like $10,000 a month. Like it's like we're not like a small adjustment away from paying like market prices for what we need to keep us alive here in America. Like our basics of food. I mean, food, look at the One Big Beautiful Bill. Even if it doesn't pass, the knowledge that those things have like controlled prices that are set outside of the market, it's absurd. It's absurd. There's one where they actually have like literally, can't remember if it's the attorney general or one of the secretaries, but they're in charge with setting prices on certain things. Like, and it talks about it. It was like, it uses different lawyery phraseology, but very specifically, it's like, we're not going to pay the market price. Instead, we're going to pay this price of what this guy agrees that it is. And it's like, it says in the bill, you're not allowed to pay the market price. Like we're not allowed to pay what these things actually cost to make. Alicia, who I happen to know, says, Ben, if I see you fall asleep, he's doing fine. He's gotten up to take care of the kids and the dog, and he is being a good man as well as a good friend.
My sweetheart, she's actually in the hospital.
Oh my!
She's got a lung disease, bronchiectasis, and she's been very sick. So I didn't realize she was watching.
Well,
I am falling asleep. Oh man.
That's all right. We appreciate it. I mean,
you haven't yawned once, and I've yawned like 4 or 5 times. So,
is he keeping it under wraps? Like he's got like a good mechanism going on.
That's the reason why he keeps getting up and going off frame. He's like,
I was checking on kids.
drinks a Powerade and everything. Look, I could go off about this forever. Ben, did you have any current events that you wanted to talk about? I didn't want to skip anything.
Not really. Not what we pretty much already discussed. I'm actually finding myself liking Rand Paul more and more.
Mixed.
Yeah. I mean, he endorsed Trump, and unfortunately, I think the thing with Rand Paul is this is a cycle for him. He endorses the bad guy and then gets shocked when bad guy does bad things. And I'm just like, man, get off of it, dude. Like at some point you need to stop, right? Like it's like he says many like, oh yes, Israel should be free, but I will endorse Caesar for this next election. It's like,
it's like, it's funny.
I'm trying to sync it up.
Back when I was a Ron Paul stan, Rand Paul was like the second best that you could possibly be. And I've become incredibly disillusioned by Rand Paul. But then the one that I thought was like the spot that I used to hold in reverence for Rand Paul became Thomas Massey. And Thomas Massey is probably the best incarnation of the libertarian Republican adjacent that's left, after Amash. Amash was legitimately good. And then Massey is like the second best, and it's a long, long away second best because my goodness, that guy's rhetoric is just so terrible. Like he usually makes the right decision when it comes to voting, but rhetorically he's a Trump sycophant. And it's very frustrating to see him toe the line rhetorically and make the correct votes most of the time, but still position himself as a sycophant. And he's towing the same line that, like, I think AOC largely does on the Democrats, where it's like he stands up. He can be counted to stand up most of the time vote wise when he's needed to stand up to salvage his reputation, but rhetorically both he and AOC stand with their respective parties when they should be setting themselves apart. And it's very frustrating to listen to.
It's party over everything, and that's something that's really
I mean, at the very least, for the most part, they tend to vote their principles, which is better than you could say for a lot of these people. The people that say they have principles, like Rand Paul. Because I actually challenged Massey one time on Facebook and got a direct response from either him or his campaign. I don't know if it was actually him, but he's like he challenged me to, like, okay, I at the time I was still considered myself to be like a right libertarian, and I was condemning him for all of the Trump sycophancy because I kept seeing it in his rhetoric. And he's like, name a single bill that you disagree with me on a libertarian principle that I voted on. Name a single bill. And so I took the opportunity to, like, go, okay, I'll take this at face value. And so I went through and looked at all of his voting records. I couldn't really find anything to impugn him on. And this was probably like 2019 era that this happened. And I couldn't find anything that he had voted on up to that point that I was like, I can't really find anything I faulted him with voting record wise. It was just a constant rhetoric. There's not a polite term for the term that I want to use for his sycophancy.
I don't want to override you totally, Ben. What did you see from Rand Paul that you liked?
Oh, I just like these standing up to Trump.
Yeah.
Right now, I mean, he's like a lone guy in the Senate right now.
Yeah, I think only Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, right, that have really said anything counter to him very much. Unless is there another Republican that I'm missing that went against Trump in the One Big Beautiful Bill? I'm trying to think.
I imagine that as a result of the fact that in the House it passed at such a narrow margin, it was like 216 to 215 or something like that. One vote.
By one vote, yeah.
And the fact that Elon's gone off the grid, and the fact that several prominent Republican senators are going against it, I have a feeling it's not going to pass.
That'll be good.
Because I think enough stink has gone on at this point that it's going to be a very hard sell. And if it does end up passing, it's going to cost them huge in the midterms. But
I've tried my best to. I think I told you this already, Aaron. That, like, I'm trying to see if they do make any changes to the bill, and that way I don't have to just reread the entire thing. I'm going to try to analyze what the changes were, and I think that would be very illuminating, because most of these bills we have additions to them. I remember with the ACA, like, when they just buy somebody's vote, that suddenly a section would appear which would be like, $50 million to a hospital that doesn't exist in South Shore, and then all of a sudden South Shore senator votes yes on it, right? So
Right.
like that was fascinating to trace, and I think that this would be another thing that we would just get like. It would be interesting to trace how bribable people are, or if they'll actually change the substance of the bill in any meaningful way. I'm always amazed by like what people are kind of like offended by, like what puts them off their like, because to me, a lot of this bill was bad. But like the thing about like the states not being able to regulate federal AIs or whatever, like that was like the 20th, 30th worst thing in the bill. And that seems to be a real sticking point with a lot of these. I mean, that's what got Marjorie Taylor Greene and the other one who were like, sorry, we didn't know this was in the bill. And now we're out.
I consider them to be like latched at the hip.
Was it?
I don't know.
Was it Babbitt? I think it's a guy that I'm thinking of.
Oh, okay.
Did she express regret though?
I don't know. I whenever I hear Green, I just assume Boebert's nearby because they travel in packs.
Yeah, the hand job in the theater one is different than the screaming in the middle of the State of the Union address one. This is
right.
What?
Yeah, they're voting kind of lockstep. Well, if you guys don't have anything else, I think we're good to wrap here. But as always, take care, stay safe, everybody. You are loved, you are enjoyed. We have more viewers now than even when I noticed before that we have a lot of viewers. So I appreciate everybody who showed up and watched and who commented. And we are the Love First Christians. There is an invite link in the description of this video. If you are not a Christian, you are perfectly welcome to be here. I think our last couple who joined are not Christians and were just curious and had questions and wanted to contribute a little bit. So you are perfectly welcome. We're happy to have you. Ben, Aaron, thank you both for being here. I really do appreciate it. I want to say I appreciate it, but that sounds more like businessy than I wanted. I like seeing you guys, and I look forward to my Wednesdays when you guys are both here. So it's good talking to you, and I will see you all next week. I'll see everybody else next week as well. Bye, everybody.